And we know that David was one of the great musicians of his time. He would go play for the king. The king would
Yeah.
beckon him. He was that
Yeah.
good. It seemed like he was finding this balance of skillful, beautiful, creative output in music, and yet a heart posture it was more than just this musical expression, this beautiful expression. And I just want to call churches to, like, you got to consider, is there health in these places, because it's really, really tricky.
What do you think makes like a career, or really just a life of a creative, durable when it comes to really leaning into the season of creativity, to making things that are I guess honorable to the church and serving the church well? Like what do you look for in a creative that I guess is like foundational? I guess tiers. I guess, does that make sense? I'm missing the question in my mind, but hopefully you can kind of see what I'm getting at.
No, I love that. I love that. I think I was just celebrating this with one of our staff because we play music in our offices, and somebody had found a playlist of it's worship music, but it's what feels like the more obscure kind of fringe, like people that I've not heard of, a few people that I
Yeah.
have. And I was just telling one of our staff members, I'm like, man, there is more beautiful, creative um, music for believers, and really for the world, but from believers, that's not quote unquote, mainstream. And it hit me in the moment of, like, how many men and women out there are doing really beautiful creative work. And I was talking specifically about this playlist and songs, but I know it's bigger than that. I mean, so much bigger than
Mhm.
that. Filmmakers and artists, and I loved it too, because I had in the moment, and you just stop me at any point if I'm not answering your question, but I just
No,
got
you're
excited about
good.
this. I literally was thinking about, excuse me, these men and women, and this song came on. I get here early in the morning, and I just went and cranked the music. And so somebody showed up and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just cranking this song. And I'm literally thinking to myself, these men and women could be doing anything else. They could be using these gifts that God's given them to say and do and be, and to your point, somehow make themselves, known. They're good enough to go kind of do anything. And here they are, man. They're like just pouring their heart out. It's really beautiful. And a lot of people won't know it or hear it. And yet the people that come across them, I think, are going to be deeply moved. And I guess I just had this moment of, like, appreciation for a lot of the
Hmm.
folks that might engage in a conversation like this. Like, I think there's nothing more beautiful to me. And this is really what I'm trying to say. There's nothing more beautiful than when men and women are using the giftings that God's given them and the passions that God's put within them, um, to do and to say something beautiful, and especially something that might honor the Creator. That is such an awesome thing. And I'm not talking about Christian music. I'm not talking about fitting into some, like, framework. I'm just saying, like, God has wired you, and it's really cool. I'm old enough now where my kids are like, some of them are adults. But TJ, man, like, from a young age, I'm telling you, it was wild to see how uniquely these kids, their passions, their energy, their personalities. I mean, you know this, but, like, it's just crazy how different they are. Liz and I, same people, still madly in love, raising these children. So you think we could just raise them all and they're the same? It's like, no, God has seeded something in your heart and soul and mind, and He's not trying to trick you.
Hmm.
I love telling my kids, like, God's not trying to trick you. So He's not secretly wishing you were a mathematician because sadly you were born into the C family. You're not going to be a mathematician. All right, it ain't going to happen. But He's just not trying to trick you. So what has He made you passionate about? Like, what is He giving you? And now the question for you is, how do I utilize these and be stewards? In fact, Scripture says we're stewards of the mysteries of God. If you want to be faithful to God, steward these mysteries. The mystery Paul's talking about is the great gospel story. But the stewardship, how are we stewards? You might be a tent maker. That's what Paul was. You might be a videographer. You might be a painter. I have a 21-year-old daughter who is an artist. She's incredible. She did not get that from me. That was God given, inspired. I have a basketball player, and I have a musician, and I have an entrepreneur, and it's just awesome. And so I guess my point, even I hope I'm not dodging the question, but even just as I think about you, whoever you are out there, man, like God's not trying to trick you. Be steward. Be a faithful steward. That means, honestly, that means sharpening these tools that you've got,
Mm,
and create and do and be and do something beautiful, and look for ways to honor the one who gave you those giftings.
yeah.
And and so, I mean, I love what you're doing, TJ. I love the chance to just cheer each other on, and not what I'm not saying is go be amazing. I'm saying, like, look at the one who's given you these skill sets, and
Yeah.
by the best of your ability, bring glory and honor wherever it is the Lord takes you over the coming seasons. That's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Even just talking about like good stewardship of creative gifts. I was even thinking about this today. I was taking a walk around the city, and even just that fatherly relationship when it comes to gift giving, and like thinking about like my sons, and I want to give them the best gifts possible, but then like God giving me the best gifts possible, and like blessing me, and giving me favor in these spaces and certain spaces and relationships that I have. Like, how can I honor him best with that and give him glory back through like using it and perfecting it and crafting it and all these sorts of things. And I love that idea. But I think what's hard for leaders sometimes, maybe even, and we can kind of pivot to maybe something that you might have a pretty good hold of and a strength in when it comes to like worship leaders and pastors and this sorts of thing. I think we feel that, and we even have team members maybe that have like creative ambitions, and they want to do these things, and they want to use their gifts for the kingdom, but like we just don't know how to foster that well in like a good creative environment that is also a healthy one, if that makes sense, like a green pasture in which they can feast and begin to cultivate that life, but also not one that they either burn out in or even try to build their own platform in, and then you have to go in and clean it up. Like how have you fostered good creative culture well, I guess, whether it be on like your teams at Worship Initiative or in churches, in your own artist projects when you were working and doing that sort of thing? Like how have you managed that well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think early on, if you would have found me 20 years ago, I don't know that I fostered it well, actually. And I think it's tricky, man. I think when the younger version of me thought very little about the the reality of what it is we were doing as the people of God gathered. So I'm going to speak specifically about church work here, because this is where it gets tricky. I actually was at one of the most creative churches in the country. You mentioned Leland. He used to come down. We're both Houston guys. All right. So
Yeah, yeah.
Leland used to come down on Sunday night when we had a service, and he, as a young 15, 16-year-old, got to know him. Very creative environment. And there was some good in that. I mean, I met just really amazing people, lots of creative artists. The downside, and I'm not talking about anybody else, I'm talking about me. The downside is that I was so focused on beauty and creativity, though I find those very important, and I'm going to make sure I caveat this. They, it was an override on
Yeah.
the fact that people are gathered to sing and sing truth. And I think there's a pendulum here. And again, I'm talking specifically about church work, but the pendulum often is swung to the idea that, man, let's create something beautiful and creative, and let's just see what happens. You swing the pendulum this side. Let's just ensure that truth is being delivered, and it's actually not beautiful. It's not creative, and there's not much intention. And I spend my days now calling the church to embrace both of those things.
Hmm.
Play with great skill. David says, play skillfully. And then we know that David was one of the great musicians of his time. He would go play for the king. The king would
Yeah,
beckon him. He was that
yeah.
good. And so it seemed like he was finding this balance of skillful, beautiful, creative output in music, and yet a heart posture it was more than just this musical expression, this beautiful expression. And I just want to call churches to, like, you got to consider, is there health in these places, because it's really, really tricky. And so for me, what I often say is, let's put some priorities. If you don't have a list of convictions and priorities as you lead a team or you lead worship within a congregation, it starts to get really muddy. And you can,
Yeah.
this idea of pendulum swing becomes really easy. But let me give you an example. So, like, if I'm leading a creative team, do I want how do I say it? Beauty, um, and expression, and a creative environment. Do I want those to be one of the values? Yes, yes, yes. It just cannot be the first value. It
Yeah.
cannot be number one on the list. Number one on the list is, I think, has to be, are we singing truth? Number two, at least on my list, would be, are we Christ centered? In other words, is there enough Jesus? Is this vaguely spiritual? Number three, empowered by the Spirit of God. We're not dependent on our own strength. We're
Yeah.
indwelling in us the Spirit of God. Number four, congregational singing. Are we thinking about these things? I mean, you can see how this goes. Oh, hey, number five, beauty. Beauty. It's on my list. It just cannot be number one. And so
Mhm.
I say all that to say, TJ, it's like, this is tricky when you add a spiritual dimension in a congregational emphasis,
Yeah.
because if you're not careful, you could get sideways. So you go, well, how have you done it? Well, 20 years ago, I didn't do it. I think the best advice I would give 20 years later, the leader that I am today, although I don't serve a local church, I would say, articulate convictions with your team over and over and over again, and ensure that skillful playing, beautiful expression, creativity are part of that conversation. It just cannot be number one on the list.